The young soldiers saw a worn-out woman with a scruffy dog. An easy target. But when their general arrived, she ignored them and saluted the dog's portrait on the woman's arm. They just threatened a legend. The old RV, christened the Ark, with a piece of faded electrical tape on its sun-bleached dashboard, coughed once, sputtered, and coasted to a dead stop. Cora Riley didn't curse. She just rested her forehead against the steering wheel for a long moment, the vinyl warm and cracked beneath her skin. Beside her on the passenger seat, a scruffy mutt with one floppy ear and intelligent brown eyes whined softly. "I know, Scout." "I know," Cora murmured, reaching over to scratch behind his ear. "Just another adventure." Her gaze drifted to the small, polished wooden box secured in the passenger side cup holder. It was smooth to the touch, its surface reflecting the hazy North Dakota sky. Inside were the ashes of Onyx, a Belgian Malinois of such legendary status that whispers of his deeds were still traded like ghost stories in the barracks of Tier 1 units. He had been more than a dog, he had been her other half. This whole journey was for him. And for Jess. The memory hit without warning, sharp and clear as the day it happened. The dust of Kandahar, the coppery smell of blood in the air. Jess, her human partner, was propped against a blast wall, her grin impossibly wide for someone so pale. She'd pressed a small, worn map into Cora's hand. "Promise me, Rap," Jess had whispered, her voice a reedy thread. "When this is all over, you take the big guy. You take Onyx. And you show him everything. Show him what we were fighting for. The quiet places. The diners. The big, stupid, beautiful country. Don't let him just be a weapon. Let him be a dog." Cora had promised. But Onyx hadn't made it back from that last mission either, staying behind to protect the evac chopper. So now she had his ashes, a scruffy rescue named Scout who needed a second chance, and a promise to keep to two ghosts. A road sign she'd passed a mile back read, Minot Air Force Base, 5 miles. The chain-link fence bordering the base perimeter was just 100 yards away, shimmering in the afternoon heat. "Great. All right, buddy," she said to Scout, swinging open the RV door. "Looks like we're camping out with the flyboys." The heat hit her like a physical blow. She pulled her hair, a cascade of sun-streaked brown, back into a tight ponytail and popped the hood of the ancient vehicle. A plume of steam greeted her. She sighed, grabbed a wrench from a toolbox just inside the door, and slid under the front of the engine. The gravel was hot and sharp against her back. To anyone driving by, she was just another drifter, a woman at the frayed edges of society, too broke or too stubborn to call a tow truck. They wouldn't see the coiled strength in her shoulders or the hawk-like focus in her eyes. And they certainly wouldn't see the tattoo on her left bicep, normally hidden by her sleeve but now visible as she worked in her tank top. It was a masterpiece of ink and memory, a photorealistic portrait of a Belgian Malinois, Onyx, his eyes rendered with a startling, intelligent fire. Around his neck in the portrait was a collar, and woven into the pattern, so subtly it was almost invisible, was a small, 5-pointed star inside a broken circle. The sigil of a unit that didn't exist. The mark of a ghost. As she twisted the wrench, the metal hot in her hand, she didn't notice the pristine white Air Force security vehicle until it crunched to a stop on the gravel just behind her. 2 airmen stepped out, their uniforms crisp, their boots gleaming. They were young, barely out of their teens, their faces a mixture of boredom and the unearned arrogance of new authority. The taller one, with a name tag reading, Kyler, strode forward. "Ma'am," he called out, his voice a little too loud. "This is a restricted perimeter. You can't park here." Cora finished tightening a hose clamp before she responded. She slid out from under the RV, moving with a fluid grace that seemed at odds with her grease-stained tank top and worn jeans. She wiped her hands on a rag from her back pocket. "Didn't park," she said, her voice calm and even. "Broke down." From inside the RV, Scout let out a low, questioning bark. Airman Kyler's eyes darted to the vehicle. "You have an animal in there? Is it secured?" "He's fine," Cora said, her eyes narrowing slightly. "This is federal property, ma'am," the second airman, Price, chimed in, consulting a clipboard. "Regulations require you to have the vehicle removed immediately." "I'm fixing it," Cora replied simply, turning to grab another tool. "I'll be out of your hair in 20 minutes. Kyler took a step closer, puffing his chest out. "That's not your call. You're a civilian. And you need to control that thing," he said, nodding dismissively toward the RV where Scout's scruffy face was now visible in the window. "This is a military installation. We can't have stray animals running around." The word "stray" hung in the hot, still air. Cora's hand, which had been reaching for a socket wrench, stopped. She slowly turned her head to look at Kyler, her expression unreadable, but a new stillness had settled over her. It was the same stillness that always came before the storm. "His name is Scout," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. "And he's not a stray. He's with me." "Whatever," Kyler scoffed, emboldened by her lack of outright argument. "The point is, you're in violation of base security protocols. You have 5 minutes to arrange for a tow, or we'll arrange one for you." Cora stood up to her full height. She wasn't particularly tall, but she had an aura of dense, immovable gravity. She looked from Kyler to Price, then back again. They saw a middle-aged woman in dirty clothes. They had no idea they were looking at a weapon that had been holstered for a very long time. "I'm not trying to cause trouble, son," she said, her voice losing its earlier warmth. "I'm just trying to keep a promise. Now, if you'll let me get back to my work, I'll be gone before your supervisor even knows you were here." The implied dismissal of their authority was the final straw for Kyler. He reached for the radio on his shoulder. "That's it. I'm calling this in. We've got an uncooperative civilian and an unsecured animal on the perimeter." But before his fingers could press the button, the low, powerful hum of an approaching command vehicle made them all turn their heads. A black SUV with official plates was pulling off the highway, heading directly for them. The black SUV came to a silent, smooth stop beside the security truck, its tinted windows reflecting the harsh afternoon sun. The two young airmen immediately snapped to a rigid, if slightly flustered, version of attention. They recognized the vehicle. Everyone on base recognized the vehicle. Kyler's hand dropped from his radio as if it had been burned. He exchanged a panicked look with Price. They had been about to escalate a simple breakdown into a full-blown security incident, and now, the base commander herself was here to witness it. The rear door opened, and a woman stepped out. She was in her late 50s, her uniform immaculate, the silver star of a brigadier general gleaming on her collar. General Eva Rostova was a woman known for her sharp intellect and zero tolerance for incompetence. Her eyes, the color of a winter sky, took in the scene in a single, sweeping glance, the two flustered airmen, the ancient RV with steam still whispering from its engine, and the grease-stained woman standing beside it, her posture relaxed but defiant. "What's the situation here, airman?" General Rostova's voice was calm, but it carried an undeniable edge of command that made both young men flinch. Kyler swallowed hard. "General, ma'am. We have a civilian vehicle broken down on the perimeter. The individual has been uncooperative in arranging for its removal. And there's an unsecured animal." He threw a pointed look at Cora's RV. General Rostova's gaze shifted to Cora. It was a look of appraisal, of a commander assessing a potential threat. For a long moment, she just looked, her expression unreadable. Cora met her gaze without flinching, a silent standoff happening over the hoods of the two vehicles. Frustrated at being ignored, Kyler pressed on. "Ma'am, I was about to have the vehicle impounded. And per base regulations, we may need to contact animal control regarding the—" "That's enough, Kyler," General Rostova cut him off, her voice dropping a degree colder. She still hadn't taken her eyes off Cora. There was something about the woman, a familiarity in her stance, a disciplined economy of motion that belied her disheveled appearance. It was the posture of a professional soldier. Cora, tired of the spectacle, let out a quiet sigh and reached up to wipe a bead of sweat from her temple with the back of her arm. The movement was simple, unconscious. But as she raised her arm, the strap of her tank top slipped slightly, and the tattoo on her bicep was fully exposed in the bright, unforgiving sunlight. The portrait of the Belgian Malinois. The intelligent, fiery eyes. The intricately detailed collar. General Rostova froze. Her sharp, commander's mask dissolved, replaced by a look of stunned, absolute disbelief. Her lips parted slightly. The air crackled with a new, strange tension. The two airmen looked on, confused by their general's sudden silence. She took a slow, deliberate step forward, her eyes locked on the ink on Cora's arm. She wasn't looking at Cora anymore. She was looking at the dog. The world seemed to hold its breath. The distant drone of a cargo plane, the rustle of dry grass in the wind, the ticking of the RV's cooling engine, it all faded into a roaring silence in Kyler's ears. He watched as his general, a woman renowned for her unshakable composure, stood utterly transfixed, her gaze fixed on the dirty arm of the woman he had just threatened. General Rostova's eyes traced the lines of the tattoo, her mind racing back through years of classified briefings, after-action reports whispered in secure tents, and stories of ghost-like operators who existed only in rumor. She saw the powerful head of the Malinois, but her focus was on the collar. On the tiny, almost unnoticeable symbol woven into the leather pattern. A 5-pointed star inside a broken circle. Her breath hitched. It wasn't possible. That collar, Rostova's voice was barely a whisper, ragged with an emotion the young airman had never heard from her. The star. Is that Onyx? At the sound of the name, Cora's head snapped up. Her calm facade finally cracked, her eyes widening in shock. No one had spoken that name to her in almost a decade. No one was supposed to know that name. Ignoring the stunned silent airman standing at attention, General Rostova took another 2 steps forward, closing the distance between them. She stopped directly in front of Cora. Then, with a motion that was sharp, precise, and filled with a reverence that bordered on holy, she raised her right hand to her temple. She saluted. It was not a salute to Cora. Her eyes were still locked on the image of the dog on Cora's arm. It was a salute to the legend inked into her skin. Kyler felt his jaw go slack. Price looked like he was about to faint. A 4-star general was saluting a greasy mechanic on the side of the road. The world had tilted off its axis. Cora stared at the general, her mind a whirlwind of confusion and memory. Slowly, as if waking from a long dream, she lowered her arm. "You knew him," she stated, her voice thick. "I didn't know him," Rostova said, finally lowering her hand, her eyes now rising to meet Cora's. They were shining with unshed tears. "He saved me. And my team. Zabul Province, 2013. We were leading a foot patrol into a village, and he came out of nowhere with his handler. He sat down 50 feet from us and refused to move. Our EOD tech said the ground was clear. His handler just said, 'The dog says no.'" Rostova took a deep, shaky breath. They found it 20 minutes later. A daisy chain of IEDs, pressure-plated. Enough to wipe out my entire platoon. He saved us all. Her gaze dropped back to the tattoo. "I never knew the handler's call sign. They were just ghosts. But I never forgot the dog's eyes." She looked back at Cora. "You're Raptor." It wasn't a question. Cora just nodded, her throat too tight to speak. General Rostova turned, her entire demeanor shifting back to one of icy command as she faced her 2 terrified airmen. "This woman," she said, her voice low and lethal, and the K9 honored on her arm, "have done more for this country than you can possibly comprehend in your lifetimes. You will stand down. You will not speak to her again unless she speaks to you first. And you," she pointed a finger at Kyler, will get on that radio and you will request a full-service crew from the motor pool to report to my location in 5 minutes. You will tell them it is a priority tasking, for me, personally. Am I understood?" "Yes, General," they both stammered in unison. Tyler fumbled for his radio, his hands shaking so badly he could barely press the button. The base mechanics, a pair of seasoned master sergeants who had seen it all, arrived in under 5 minutes. They took one look at the general standing beside the old RV, another at Cora, and seemed to understand instantly that this was no ordinary roadside assist. Without a word, they got to work. General Rostova led Cora to the relative cool of her air-conditioned SUV. The two young airmen, Kyler and Price, stood awkwardly outside, looking like statues of shame. "They're good kids," Rostova said quietly, gesturing toward them. "Just green. They see the uniform, not the person inside it." "I remember being that green," Cora admitted, her voice still raspy. "A long time ago." "Tell me about him," Rostova said, her voice soft. "About Onyx." And so, for the first time in years, Cora spoke of him to someone who understood. She spoke of his intelligence, how he could track a scent over bare rock in a sandstorm. She spoke of his courage, how he dragged a wounded soldier twice his size into a ditch under heavy fire. At the general's urging, a small group of the base's K-9 security forces and their handlers were quietly assembled near the RV. They stood at a respectful distance, listening as Cora, leaning against the warm hood of her vehicle, began to tell the last story. It was Jess's last mission before rotating home, Cora began, her eyes distant, seeing the jagged peaks of the Hindu Kush instead of the flat plains of North Dakota. "My partner. We were tasked with overwatch for a SEAL team hitting a high-value target in a mountain fortress. Onyx was with us. His job was perimeter security and early warning. The young handlers leaned in, their own dogs sitting patiently at their feet. Everything went wrong," Cora continued. "The intel was bad. The fortress was a trap. The SEALs were pinned down, taking heavy casualties. Our exfil was compromised. It was a kill box." Her hand unconsciously went to her bicep, her fingers tracing the outline of Onyx's tattooed ear. Jess was on the radio, coordinating air support that was never coming. "I was spotting targets. Onyx. Onyx was everywhere. He took down 2 enemy fighters who were trying to flank us. He alerted us to a hidden machine gun nest just seconds before it opened up on our position. The extraction chopper finally made it, but it could only make one pass. It was taking too much ground fire. The ramp was down for maybe 30 seconds. I was helping drag a wounded SEAL toward it. Jess was providing cover fire." Cora's voice grew thick. "She got hit. Badly. I saw her go down." A tear traced a clean path through the grease on her cheek. "She didn't wipe it away. I tried to go back for her, but the SEALs held me back, forcing me onto the chopper. They said it was too late. The ramp was coming up. But Onyx," her voice broke. "He didn't get on. He saw Jess go down, and he turned back. He stood over her body, facing the enemy fighters who were closing in, and he held his ground. He fought. He gave us the extra 10 seconds the chopper needed to lift off. The clearing was utterly silent, save for the quiet panting of the listening dogs. The last thing I saw on the thermal camera was his heat signature, standing guard over her. He never left his partner's side." She looked at the young handlers, her eyes filled with a pain that was a decade old but still sharp as glass. "He was the best soldier in that valley. He was loyal to the end. That's the story of this tattoo. It's for both of my partners. The ones I had to leave behind." She finished speaking, and no one moved. No one spoke. In the quiet that followed, a young airwoman handler reached down and hugged her own German shepherd, burying her face in its fur. They all understood. This wasn't just a story about a dog. It was a story about the soul of a warrior. The spell was broken when one of the master sergeants slid out from under the RV. "All set, ma'am," he said, wiping his hands and giving Cora a nod of profound respect. Replaced the fuel pump and cleaned the carburetor. She should run like a top. The mood had completely shifted. Airman Kyler, his earlier arrogance replaced by a deep, humbling shame, quietly approached with 2 bottles of water. He offered one to Cora and knelt down to place the other in front of Scout, who sniffed it and then began to lap it up gratefully. "I'm sorry, ma'am," Kyler said, not quite meeting her eyes. "About your dog." "Both of them." "He's a good boy," Cora said, nodding toward Scout. "Just a little rough around the edges. Like me." A faint smile touched her lips, the first one they had seen. General Rostova walked with Cora back to the driver's side door of the RV. She pressed a small, heavy object into Cora's palm. It was a command coin, thick and made of brass, bearing the insignia of the base. "For distinguished service," Rostova said simply. "It's not much." "It's more than enough," Cora replied, closing her fingers around it. She tucked it into the small wooden box, next to Onyx's ashes. "He should have it." Before she climbed into the driver's seat, the young K9 handlers who had listened to her story approached. One by one, they gave her a silent, respectful nod. One of them, the young woman with the German shepherd, spoke up. "Thank you for sharing that, ma'am. We'll remember Onyx." Cora felt a warmth spread through her chest, a feeling she hadn't realized was missing for a very long time. The solitary weight of her promise felt just a little bit lighter, as if it were now being shared by a new, younger pack. She started the engine. It hummed to life, strong and steady. As she pulled away, the small group of soldiers, the general, the mechanics, the K9 handlers, and even Kyler and Price, stood watching. They didn't salute. It felt more personal than that. They just watched her go, a silent honor guard for a legend they had, for a brief moment, been allowed to meet. As she merged back onto the highway, the sun setting behind her, she glanced at Scout, who was now curled up asleep on the passenger seat. Then she looked at the wooden box. Her 2 partners. Her 2 promises. "We're not so alone anymore, boys," she whispered. The road stretched out before her, a ribbon of asphalt leading into the vast, quiet heart of the country. For the first time in a decade, she didn't feel like she was running from the ghosts of her past. She felt like she was carrying their light forward, into the future. The story of a hero is not just in how they fight, but in how they are remembered. What does loyalty mean to you? Share your thoughts in the comments, and please, always remember to comment with respect. If this story of sacrifice and honor touched your heart, consider liking, sharing, and subscribing for more tales that remind us of the quiet heroes all around us.